But hi, everybody. I am Sophie Smith. I am the Assistant Director at York Public Library, and I am so pleased tonight to bring you this program. It is the penultimate program in our climate series for this winter and spring season that we've been putting together with York Ready for Climate Action. And it has been a real roller coaster through all of the different ways that we can engage with taking our part in climate issues. But this one I think is a topic that is very interesting to a lot of folks, which is sort of climate-friendly lawn and garden and sort of your natural environment around you. So for that, I've invited some of the wonderful folks in our town who work closely with this all of the time. From York Land Trust, I have Liz Walworth and Laura Popick, and from the Center for Wildlife, we have Kristen Lamb. Before I turn it over to Laura, I am actually just going to put one quick plug in for the our final program, which will be 2 weeks from today on Wednesday, May 24th at the library. We're doing an in-person program to celebrate sort of the entirety of the series, but also look at food systems and sustainable celebrations and kind of how to celebrate, but also do it in a way that is thoughtful to the environment and resources that you might engage with. So please come out and join us next Wednesday the 24th, 5:30 to 7 at the library. But with no further ado, I will turn that over to Laura, who can kick us off.
Great. Thank you so much, Sophie. Yeah, we're really thrilled to be here with all of you and with the library. I am the Outreach and Programs Coordinator at the Land Trust. And yeah, I'm really excited to be co-sponsoring this with the Center for Wildlife and with Liz Walworth, our Stewardship Director, who's going to be delivering a really wonderful program in just a moment. But for those of you who aren't familiar with the Land Trust, we have a number of public preserves throughout town, and we have a headquarters out on Route 91 off of One Long Neck, where the address is One Long Neck Marsh Road, which is both where our office is, but also one of our 5 public preserves that you can explore, trails that go through meadows and forests, and has access to water views and is wonderful. So we just like to make sure folks know that these preserves are out there. They're for all of you. They're free to access, and we hope you can find your way to them. So you can find more information about all of our preserves on our website, and you can learn much more about the organization on our website as well. But yeah, I will hand it over to Liz to deliver this program about what you can be doing on your properties to better serve our local environment. Thanks so much.
All right, so I will start my screen share. One moment. So my name is Liz Walworth. I'm the Stewardship Director at York Land Trust. And I'm going to be teaching you all today about some basics on managing your yard and garden for climate and ecosystem resilience. So mostly in terms of what we'll be talking about that you can do in your yard, we're talking about building ecosystem resilience. But in terms of how this affects climate resilience, the IPCC, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, had a great quote on this, so I'll share. By restoring and safeguarding ecosystems on land and in the ocean, we help plants and animals to build climate resilience. Nature, in turn, can help us regulate the climate, give us clean, safe water, control pests and diseases, pollinate our crops. However, investing in nature alone won't be enough. What it means by this last part is, we should be doing the work to enhance our ecosystems, but we can't also forget, fixing our other systems, minimizing the amount of carbon that we're contributing to the atmosphere, and really interrogating how our systems are contributing to climate change. So focusing back in on ecosystem resilience, that's really the health of our ecosystem, whether it has redundancies built in to support itself, whether it's able to respond to threats that it may come across related to climate or extreme weather, whether it's able to adapt. If we lose a couple species, is it able to bring in other species that are able to fill that niche? And is the land able to recover, or does it stay in a state that is damaged or not fully functional? And all of this is really, coming back to maintaining those connections that both provide for wildlife, it provides for our ecosystem benefits like clean water and clean air. And these tiny little connections and interactions are really what the health of our ecosystems are built on. So the average lawn, it's usually Kentucky bluegrass in Maine, and that's a species from Europe that overwinters really well, but it needs a lot of inputs. It needs water, it needs herbicides and pesticides to stay looking uniform and pretty. It's sod forming, or some gardeners may recognize this as a rhizomatic root system. This means that nothing else is coming up in between these blades of grass. It's really a dense clump of roots that's not going to allow, other species to come up. It's high maintenance. It needs a lot of different kinds of inputs, and it needs you to be cutting it constantly because it grows quickly and tall. And it's not really of value to wildlife. It doesn't provide forage, it doesn't provide cover. And because it's not feeding back into our system and providing that benefit, but it's taking in so many inputs, it's inherently extractive. So if your yard looks like that, you are at the beginning of your yardscaping journey. There's so much you can do to improve and make your lawn a haven for local pollinators. You can make your lawn bee friendly, which means you're taking out the herbicides, the pesticides, any chemicals you're using, and that basically just takes care of the stuff that's really aggressively damaging our ability for pollinators to function and their systems. You can participate in No Mow May. If you start mowing in June, you've given a whole month for pollinators to be able to come out of hibernation, take in a lot of nutrients for the spring. And then if you continue to mow every 2 weeks, you're allowing them a little bit of food within that 2-week window that you're not mowing, that allows wildflowers to come up in between your grasses, whether that's clover or dandelion. Another thing you can do is skip fall cleanup. I know not everyone likes leaves on their lawn, but if you are able to keep leaves on your lawn somewhere, even if it's sequestered somewhere on your property, you're leaving all of these places where insects will overwinter, or amphibians or other creatures. A lot of insects will leave, larvae or pupas to overwinter in those leaves. And if you're, mowing over them, or if you're packing them into bags and bringing them to a landfill, you're really getting rid of your native diversity. Another thing you can do if you're not a fan of letting your lawn go wild is you can just garden more and take up more of your yard with native plants. If you're able to do this, you're still creating diversity, but you're able to have that patch of yard, whether that serves as just a pathway or an open area to play and enjoy. And the last thing that I would consider doing if you are someone that doesn't spend a lot of time lounging in your backyard is meadow mowing. If you mow once or twice a year and you're seeding your meadow with native wildflower plants, it's not going to right away turn into a beautiful wildflower meadow, but over the course of a couple years, it'll really make that turnaround and become almost successional habitat that has things starting to come up at various different levels, that really benefits and provides food to native insects. So I want to ask, what do you think of when you hear pollinators? A lot of us think about this insect right here. This is a Western honeybee. It is not native to the United States. It's a really incredible beneficial insect. But if we focus on just trying to cater to the honeybee, we're really creating a lot of competition and issues for our native pollinators, especially our native bees. Looking at our native pollinators, we have so much diversity beyond just the Western honeybee. We have beetles, flies, hummingbirds, moths, wasps, butterflies, and bees, most of which nest in the ground. So we really want to be thinking about creating resources for all of these different creatures in our yards. So here's a couple things that you can do to really accommodate for these creatures. The first thing is to limit outdoor lighting. This especially affects moths. Moths are really drawn to these outdoor lights. We've all seen them, whether it's the invasive winter moth or some of our friendly native pollinators. They're really important nighttime pollinators, but they do get distracted by our lights, and it will take up a lot of their night. So if you're able to turn those off, they can focus on going about their nighttime business as they should be. Otherwise, that energy is really wasted, and it's hard to provide for themselves most of the night. Next, addressing invasive species in your yard goes a long way. These species may provide some cover, but they don't provide food sources. They're not contributing to the food web. They're taking up a lot of space and they're not allowing a lot of diversity typically. And this tends to become an issue over large areas of land if it's not checked. So this, as a first step, goes a long way to making your yard more productive for wildlife. It also confers the extra benefit of, especially if you have something like barberry, ticks are really drawn to barberry. They say up to 80% more ticks exist in barberry patches. So if you want to, make your yard a little bit safer for yourself as well, that's a great thing to get rid of. Another step you can take is considering native over exotic ornamentals. If you're someone who picks out new nursery plants every year, both of these plants are beautiful. These are rhododendrons, or no, not rhododendrons, hydrangeas. Only one of them is providing food for local wildlife, and it's the one on the right. The one to the right is benefiting all kinds of local pollinators. It belongs in its environment. And insects and these plants have been adapting relationships over thousands and thousands of years, the native ones. Next, we'll look at habitat enrichment, things that you can add to your yard that will really boost its value to pollinators and insects. First is a bee bath. If you have a bird bath in your backyard already, this is something that you can add easily. It's just adding stones into a bird bath, or you can put out a plate or a tray and just create some more texture, create some more spaces to climb. Sometimes bees will fall into water bodies and drown, or it'll take a lot of energy to get out again. So it really helps if you're able to give them surfaces to climb up to land safely, because they do need hydration, they do need water features. But they also need ways to get out of the water features and access those safely. Next would be to create, different kinds of textures in your yard, different kinds of soils, different odd little nesting nooks in your yard and in your garden. This is a stone pathway, and there's sand between those two stones where a bee is nesting. This is a really popular option for ground nesting bees. They love to nest in sand in walkways. So just providing these different kinds of soil and these different kinds of mixes of introduced and native materials creates really great ecosystem niches that they can occupy in your space. So when you're planning your garden or when you're taking care of your garden, it helps to plan for structural diversity. And that means creating different levels of vegetation that allow space for nesting, year-round forage, cover, wind buffers, especially for native, insects. These insects, because they're flying, it takes a lot of energy to try to fly against the wind or fly in high winds at all. And if you're planting shrubs or trees in that area, the wind buffers really help protect them and keep them from using all of their energy trying to get around. Herbaceous ground cover, that helps ground nesting insects by just creating an option that's not an impervious surface that they can traverse safely, and provides habitat for them as well. And let's talk a little bit more about year-round forage. So our gardens are kind of like orchestras where things bloom at different times. And when they bloom, they become food sources for our native insects. And we want to be trying to put together an orchestra where something is always blooming, something's always providing a food source. In this picture, we have serviceberry, which is one of our early bloomers. And then it goes to snapdragons and then milkweed. And then one of our late bloomers that people either love or hate, typically goldenrod. All of these plants are great food for native species. And if you plant a diversity in terms of blooming schedule, it provides year-round food. And don't forget trees. People often forget trees, but if you're putting in a new tree or you're thinking of creating more of a wind buffer, or an old tree's coming out, it can be a great opportunity to introduce some new, habitat, some new materials, some new pollen to a space. If you're looking to support a general insect population, willows are incredible. They support around 300 different kinds of insects. But there are also other great plants like speckled alder. Definitely plant something that's appropriate for your lawn environment, whether it's wet, dry, full sun, partial shade. But think about how many insects, trees, and these larger shrubs will support. And when we're doing our planting, it's not just about us, and it's not just about pollinators, it's about creating this full web of ecosystem services. Some of them benefit us directly in terms of our culture, the beautiful world we get to live in. Some of it is, climate related in terms of flood control. We create microclimates when we're in a green environment that provides us cooler temperatures. If you think about being in a forest on a hot day versus in a parking lot, that feels really different. And it also provides us, food, clean water, clean air. And here are a couple examples of what it looks like for different people taking different approaches to have a greener yard. For this first example, we've got someone going for a low mow approach. You can see the clover coming up between their grass. It looks like they're not putting in any yard inputs, so they're not watering, they're not putting in pesticides or herbicides. There's some structural diversity. They've planted some bushes and some trees up closer to their house. And they're also upfront providing advocacy and shared resources for pollinators and being able to change your yard. So that's a way that they found it accessible to contribute. This second example is a wildflower meadow. So this is mowed annually once a year. And this person chose to supplement the native seed bank that was in this area with a native seed mix. Most native seed mixes will have that element of year-round forage because they're planting such a diversity of native plants. And again, it's not going to look like this the first year, but after a couple years, this is what pops up, and it's really gorgeous to see at different times of year. And my last example is native plant gardening. So this is a mix of creating a recreational space. It's got paths and seating. There's some structural diversity. You can see all these different plants are coming up at different levels, from the clover that's in the walkway to some of the trees towards the back, and in the middle, all of this bee balm, the native hydrangea. And it's really nice that they're introducing a mix of introduced material and native material. So you can see they're creating some of those little nooks and crannies for bees and other insects to be nesting inside of. And this whole structure system really creates wind barriers, so flying insects are welcome, and you can see a couple monarch butterflies making themselves welcome there. And they've chosen to plant some native trees. If you're interested in taking this kind of approach, you can take a look at tons of resources from the U.S. Forest Service, USDA, Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. The Audubon Society has a great program called Habitat Heroes, where you can, register your lawn as a habitat for birds, for pollinators, and they have some great guidance on that. Maine's Wild Seed Project is doing an incredible job of providing resources. They can tell you what to plant, and they can provide seeds for all different kinds of native plants that you might not be able to find at local nurseries. UMaine Extension and also University of New Hampshire's extension program is incredibly helpful, and they provide reliable information on all of this. And your local land trusts and conservation commissions are working as well to try to create information about this. So all of these different environmental organizations are trying to support people in creating more habitat on their private land and in their backyards. So feel free to reach out or explore these organizations' resources and find an approach that works for you. Thank you for coming, and I look forward to hearing questions after our next presentation.
And I'll just jump in. Thank you so much, Liz. That was great. I learned a lot myself in that presentation. And just a quick plug for York Land Trust. This is a timely presentation because this weekend on Saturday, we're actually having our 3rd annual native plant sale. So if you're looking for native plant varieties, we'll have close to 30 different varieties of perennials and shrubs and some trees. So come on out and stock up for your yard. That's 9 to noon on Saturday. Thank you.
So I think that we have a couple of questions, I think more specifically about No Mow May. I will, I don't know, Kristen, if you think that it would be better served to talk about that now or after your program, if that's going to touch on that at all. But if not, we'll move along to our next section.
I can certainly jump in, and Liz, you might have some wisdom too, or Laura as well, about bees getting confused. But I think I would go back to what Liz was saying is like, when people are keeping honeybees, they are usually kind of planning the food that is available for them. But we have really many different kinds of native pollinators that aren't relying on cultivated plants. They're eating from locusts. They're going in from the maple trees and dandelion, clover. Then they move on to, at the end of the year, the asters or even sweet fern, spice bush, blueberries. So I don't think that bees get confused. I think that that's kind of I consider that maybe to be like a little bit of anthropomorphizing and using that kind of human-centric view to be like, to kind of justify like not mowing a lawn. Bees aren't going to get confused, and if anything, it actually gives them more food in the early time when they're waking up out of hibernation and they really need that food. So I scientifically don't think that that's really a concern that they would be confused. That's an awesome question, though.
I'd like to chime in as well. If you want to provide that longer lasting food source, I would recommend really mowing every 2 weeks if possible, just to give them a little bit of consistency. It could be an issue if you had a population for some reason really establish themselves after a long winter there, and then possibly not have the sustenance year round to be able to stay. Although I would have to learn a little bit more about how they choose their nesting sites after winter. But I would say there's a lot that you can do to continue providing that food source if you're concerned about, not having enough after May.
Yeah, Lynn, are you asking about cultivated bees or native pollinators? I guess would be helpful.
I was asking about not cultivated bees. We're in the woods, and I was just wondering if no mow May really does help with just native wild bees and birds. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say it absolutely does. I think those are traditionally the native food sources for them during these months, and it has been a pattern. I love this new trend that neighborhoods just get rid of all of that right away. So I think it does help. And then the lawn so high. Liz and Laura, I don't know if you have. So my husband actually gets like he just buys like 20-year-old mowers, like push mowers, off Facebook Marketplace, and we keep the deck high, and they kind of go over everything. And if you lose one, it was $25 or whatever, and then move on to the next one. But we definitely let it go for the whole month and even longer. We even sometimes mow some high tick areas like on our trail and stuff with the trusty old like push mower that's pretty rugged. So obviously there's different considerations for what kind of equipment people have. But I think, yeah, we kind of beat on ours, but I don't know if you guys have any good advice.
I mean, I love that approach
Yeah.
of reusing old equipment to do things that can really stress out your mower. I think also, I don't know if I mentioned this recommendation, but a lot of the same, resources that suggest mowing every 2 weeks also say that when you cut it, it should be 3 inches long, ideally, so you can get those tops of the wildflowers to come back.
Mm-hmm.
So I would echo that, keeping the deck high if you can, and mowing multiple times if you're not willing to do that, which is frustrating, but it's just for that last part of May, early June.
All right, so I'll get started, and then we'll have time for more questions at the end. Let's see, make sure I'm sharing. Okay. Can everybody see? Okay, great. So my name is Kristen Lamb. I'm the executive director here at the Center for Wildlife. And I've titled it Gardening in Wildlife Habitat because we always kind of think about like wildlife in our garden, but I just challenge everyone to kind of think of us gardening within the existing ecosystem. Just a little background on the Center for Wildlife for folks who might not be as familiar. We have been in existence since 1986. I believe our founder jumped on this call. One of our founders, Dr. Jerry Beekman and Dawn Hill, founded us back then when they saw there was just no place to bring an injured or orphaned wild animal, and also that people in our community wanted there to be a place to be able to bring a barred owl hit by a car, or the Blanding's turtle on her way to lay eggs that was also hit by a car. In the early years, we were just trying to fix animals with intuition and a little bit of veterinary medicine and get them back to the wild. And now we've actually treated over 75,000 injured and orphaned wild animals that represent 190 different species, and we present about 400 to 500 environmental education programs at schools and libraries and senior centers throughout the year. And we also practice now in our clinic, our medical clinic, conservation medicine. So we're not just trying to fix a broken wing and get the animal back to the wild. When we get in loons, for example, we're testing for lead. We work with the Northeast Loon Working Group. We document behaviors. We can even do cloacal swabs for microplastics, and we're putting a lot of information back to create to contribute to that, like missing baseline data, to catch emergent disease, and also to be able to speak about the health of the overall ecosystems that our wildlife are living with. And then we do field usually between 50 and 60,000 phone calls a year from our community on our wildlife assistance hotline. And a lot of those calls are, I have a woodchuck in my garden, I'm gonna trap it, what do I do? Or, I found a baby bird on the ground, it can't fly. We're like, okay, cool, its parents are probably around, go put it back. So our goal really is not to like be collecting all these wild animals. A lot of it is promoting coexistence and helping people understand more about the wildlife that we're sharing our environment with. So we take a One Health approach, and this is an emerging kind of initiative. It was first kind of crystallized at a health consortium in about 1984, and there's a One Health initiative. There's a chapter out of Portland, which is really great, but it's a global initiative, and it's kind of the recognition of the intersection between human health, animal health, and environmental health. And as Liz was saying about resilience, for a changing climate, we're all under pressure, and there's just more intersection between as we're expanding our homes and our living and our work and everything into wildlife habitats, there's fragmentation. We've got severe weather patterns and periods of drought. We are all just even more so interconnected, and those connections are often invisible. So I was really excited to be able to speak with you all tonight to kind of talk about, maybe challenge everyone to think about, rethink how we want our gardens to be, and we want our backyards to be like.
Hey, Kristen, real quick.
Yes.
You have a comment in the.
Oh, okay.
So,
Great.
are you able to go to full presentation mode so that we can see the
Okay.
full?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah,
I can, and then I think, oh, perfect. There we go.
Great, thank you.
Nice. You're welcome. Okay. Thank you, John. Sorry about that. Sophie was giving us too much credit in the beginning, saying that we know what we're doing with Zoom here. Okay, so has anyone heard the phrase NIMBY before? It stands for not in my backyard. So it's like, oh, I love watching woodchucks frolic, but not in my backyard. I love that coyotes are balancing rodent and even now deer populations in the Northeast, but not in my backyard. I want there to be this X, Y, and Z, but not in my neighborhood. So we kind of do this subconsciously all the time. And we also, it's so cool to see this no mow May and people having, towering milkweed. We first started having milkweed pop up in our front yard like 3 years ago, and now it's just totally taken over the front path and the front steps. And the first couple of years I was like, oh my gosh, like we're the house that people think a witch lives at, and we've got these like towering plants that don't fit in, and once they're done, they kind of fall over in these giant stalks. But I'm just seeing it pop up over and over, and like more people are kind of embracing that, which I think is just so cool. So, and the Center for Wildlife too, if people haven't been there in a while, we just finished a new like $6.5 million facility. We had been operating out of a donated ranch house for the first like 30 years of our existence. So it was way overdue. actually 36 years of existence because it's a very new building. But we actually came up against all of these kind of pressures and the way that people do this kind of like quick and dirty landscaping. Like there's these tried and true methods of like, you're going to want these grasses. We can get rid of all that stone and all that, you know, people are trying to get rid of all of the coarse woody debris and everything after we did our cut at the center, and we were like, no, we'll actually use all the stone as our, you know, as our driveway, and we want the coarse woody debris, we'll just grind it up and that'll be the loam for our new gardens. But I challenge everyone to rethink this, like first we do this, first we clear cut, then we bring in this fill, then we throw the seed down and we got the bluegrass lawn. Things can just look a lot different, and we use a lot less resources. We use a lot less water. We don't have to use as much, you know, pesticides and mold control and rodenticide if we're just kind of embracing the habitat that we're living in and planting things or allowing things to, you know, propagate themselves that already live with that type of soil, with that type of shade, with that amount of rainfall. So we always can ask people to consider what your habitat is. So think about, are you in a field? Are you in full shade? Are you naturally in this really cool softwoods habitat that has a ton of shade? Maybe you would want to facilitate more moss and ferns in your yard instead, and some funky, Norway spruce, or you know, maybe you want to add some quartz and things instead of trying to make a sun-loving plant grow in this darker shady area. And then who might live there? So you know, we do have to represent the wildlife side here, and this is a little porcupine baby who was about like 3 days old that came into the clinic. And we do get a lot of folks that are trapping, you know, this porcupine or this beaver has been eating my favorite apple trees, so I trapped it and relocated it. And I would, you know, remind everyone that during nesting season, when we're trapping and relocating, we're often leaving babies like this behind. And when you are trapping and relocating an animal and you have the perfect porcupine or woodchuck habitat, you're basically hanging this like vacancy sign in your yard, and someone else is going to move in because you do have that perfect habitat for those wild animals. So think about time of year, who might live there, who might you displace. And so other options instead would be, you know, if you have an area that you don't want to be disturbed by the neighbor porcupine or woodchuck, or even bear, you know, if you are keeping bees or pollinators, solar electric fencing that goes on at night is perfect. Most of those species are nocturnal. Netting. And then when we moved into our home, the folks who lived here before were so brilliant, and they actually made a swath of like 5 or 6 feet thick of blackberry and raspberry as a perimeter around the raised beds. So that's going to keep out deer and a lot of other species just kind of naturally. Those thorns and non-palatable plants will actually act as a really cool kind of first natural barrier to protect if you do have those like beautiful flashy like heads of lettuce and everything that you're growing in raised beds. There also is a great way to protect just individual trees. So if you do have your favorite magnolia and linden, and you want to protect from voles or porcupine, you can do either chicken wire or aluminum flashing just wrapped around the base of those trees, and you just have to go up 3 feet, and they can't chew through that, and they also can't climb up it, they'll slide down. So that's a great way to just protect your favorite guys. Sound is also a great natural barrier for protecting certain crops or flowers or areas of your garden that you don't want anyone going in. People do have great results for that. And we have people call all the time, like, I have voles or I have moles. And we're like, if you have a mole, like, they're actually solitary species, and they're eating insects usually. So if you have one mole, they're just aerating the soil and they're eating insects for you. So you're good. Voles, I understand, are getting at bulbs and they're getting at roots. So there are, again, really cool things have come a long way. There's solar powered things that emit waves that we can't hear that make the areas that you put those in undesirable. And then people do use scent. So there, people call sometimes and they're like, oh, can I use like coyote urine or fox urine around certain areas? And I warn against that just because usually the way that those are collected are from farmed animals. But there are other mixes of things that are like castor oil or include cedar and peppermint and other things that can protect certain plants that you might want to protect. So let it be. So again, I got No Mow May on here as well. But that idea of just promoting who lives there, we had this we had an amazing landscape architect for the project at the Center for Wildlife, and he was very careful to propose species that would already live there. So it's like along our drive is sweet fern and, other species that would just grow in because it's forest edge habitat and it's disturbed open full sun habitat. And that came in mostly without us even having to plant it. So just think about what might already live, and I have resources at the end to figure out what, how to identify what your habitat is and who might already live there. But the more we can just kind of lean into what would already grow in the habitat and kind of promote that and help that along instead of completely changing everything, the less resources that we're going to have. This is in my front yard. That's a common yellow throat. So you can see him eating the Japanese beetles and other bugs off of our Rosa rugosa. So we do have that stratified mix that Liz was talking about, where we have things at all different levels, and then milkweed there as well. I would encourage everyone to think about when you're doing site work, if you're bringing in fill, is it clean fill? A lot of times fill can have invasives in it. And I know for our town, I live in Nottingham, New Hampshire, and I'm on the Conservation Commission, and it was our own municipality that ended up spreading Japanese knotweed all over our town because the fill we were using had Japanese knotweed in it. So think about where you're sourcing your soil and your fill, and it's, those are always great questions to ask of, where is this coming from? Or can you guarantee that it's clean fill? Does it have invasives in it? And then when you're getting your plants too, what are the nursery practices? So do they use neonicotinoids? Are there, GMO species or others that are going to kind of not mix really well with native plants and, again, those native pollinators? And then just briefly, Liz went over this as well. What kind of products are you using in your yard and on your lawn? Obviously at the Center for Wildlife, we treat a lot of raptors. This is actually a baby great horned owlet that just came in last Friday that had been knocked out of her nest prematurely. We were actually able to go back, observe both adults, and get the baby back up to the nest, which is great. But there's a lot of bills coming forth and a lot of information, even from the CDC, about the impacts of secondary rodenticides, eschars. And so, we might put out things to, because we don't like the rodents or voles. But it's not just limited to those guys. And studies have shown that 90% of our like great horned owls or red-tailed hawks, the guys that naturally would be hunting and balancing everything in your yard, 90% of those guys are showing at least trace amounts of rodenticides. And we're actually seeing a lot that either pass or they're having a lot of issues because of ingesting rodents. So it's not just limited to your garden or the animals that you don't like in it. That translates to our entire ecosystem. Same with pesticides and herbicides, and then fertilizer too. So we live in obviously a beautiful region on estuaries and wooded wetlands and the ocean. And so even something we as innocuous we would think as a fertilizer can have other impacts that we might not foresee that can kind of mess with water temperature and oxygen levels. So it can have a big impact on the local ecosystem. So alternative approaches, learn to identify insects and anticipate damage. So again, like what kind of habitat are you in? Do you have Japanese beetles? Like, should you wash some of your stands with just insecticidal soap? Hand pick or prune, the tomato hornworms are huge. Can you pick one off easily and just kind of get rid of it? And then promoting beneficial bugs or species. So again, with like Liz was talking about, there's such cool things with like bee hotels and creating nooks and crannies and offering water, especially during drought times, for beneficial species. And then also coexisting. Like you might see a wasp and think like, I need to get rid of it. We actually like lived with a bald-faced hornet nest in our yard, and we kind of just watched it with curiosity. And last year, and it, we were able to even mow kind of close to it. And it's just, if you know who you have in your yard, and also if you're careful with the fill that you're bringing in, the soil that you're bringing in, if you're getting nurseries, that are, and I have a great nursery at the end here too, are growing, plants that are native or heirloom. They're not going to maybe bring a lot of invasive pests to your own home. So you can inadvertently be bringing all of your own pests to your garden in your home as well. And then minimizing plant stress by, promoting them in places where they would grow well, and making a match between the soil that you have, the access to water, spacing, obviously, etc. Encourages more ticks is a common critique of no mow May. How can we respond? Thank you, Edward, for that question. It's actually mice populations that determine how many ticks there are, which is actually tied back to the acorn mast year. So if we have a big mast year, there's more mice, and the mice are the ones that carry the Lyme bacteria. So it's not tied to how tall grass is. It's actually tied to what the mast year was and how many mice there are. So I always try to just educate people about that cycle. If people are worried about ticks being in that high grass area, maybe you just talk about that being an off limits area for the month of May as well. And that's an educational opportunity. Liz and Laura, I don't know if you have anything to add, but.
The only thing that I would add is, I would encourage some spray as well for just keeping yourself safe. But also, it's still okay during no mow May to create pathways for yourself through your property. So if you have a place in your yard that you're trying to access, that you'd like to keep open, I think you can still participate in no mow May and allow yourself that pathway that's mowed through your property.
Great. So that's it too. I want to leave time for questions, but these are just some great resources that I love. The New England Wildlife Book is amazing for helping to understand like what kind of habitat you might be living in, what trees and plants make up that habitat, and then what suite of species you might have. Good bug, bad bug. And then, you know, Garden for Wildlife, getting your backyard habitat certified through the National Wildlife Federation. It's just an awesome exercise to go through, an educational opportunity for your whole neighborhood or anyone who's involved, your family. You can always call the Center for Wildlife if you have coexistence issues. We can coach you through those. And then Sweet Fern Nursery in Cape Nettic, Maine is a really great resource for and so is York Land Trust too. You guys have an awesome plant sale every year of native plants, which is really great. So the opinion on the tick boxes placed around the property for mice to run through and covered with permethrin. So I actually have asked about this a lot or kind of researched about it, and it's like that permethrin is not one of like the dirtiest, you know, dirty dozen eschars that are trying to be removed, bills that we're trying to get removed for residential and commercial use. So I think of all the products that are out there, it's not the worst thing. And I can certainly understand. I had Lyme twice. Like the last time was 8 years ago, and I've been a lot smarter about it now, but I can empathize with that. It has to be a balance. You're welcome. Any other questions? Yeah, and we'll open it up, obviously, the full panel here. Kevin? I'll ask you to unmute there.
Okay. Oh, thank you. I've got live here in York, and I've been doing this type of yard work, but some of the problems that I've run into is that the brambles start taking over everything. And so I'll have to go out and spend hours and hours, clipping down the blackberries. That, and also there's a type of vine, I don't know what it's called, but gets up into the trees and kind of chokes trees and stuff, and they have to try to get that stuff out, and it's hard to get rid of that. Do you have any recommendations on either of those two things?
I think that's bittersweet, Liz and Laura.
I would assume so. Some multiflora can climb pretty high, but it's not as high as bittersweet. I'd say that's probably it.
Okay.
And I think it might be helpful to make it a multi-step approach. Like maybe 1 year you cut it and you wait for that section to die before you disentangle it from the tree. And that way it becomes a lot more brittle and lightweight. So you're not wrestling with something that's almost alive and still clinging to its structural host.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
I think bittersweet, we have a similar, and bittersweet's an invasive as far as I know. And we usually just try to cut as much as we can, pull it out by the roots, and then burn it right away so that it's not spreading. So yeah, that can be really tough if it takes hold.
I'd recommend also I'm sure you're already careful about this, but only doing that removal and disturbing the plant in early spring or late winter when the berries have already dropped, so you're not spreading it to a new location
Hmm.
and making your life a little bit harder.
Uh-huh.
And the brambles, Kevin, the birds love them.
Yeah, they do.
I always, we actually, we just like pull ours up and I always offer them to like friends and neighbors too, you know, if they're getting too crazy. They do transplant really well, especially in the spring and then again in the fall when it's not like super hot and dry.
Okay. I was wondering if you continually cut them, does it starve them to where they'll eventually go away? At the brambles.
I don't know, Liz or
That's a
Laura.
popular treatment technique for things like multiflora rose, and I think it would also apply to a lot of our native berry plants and brambles. But you'd need to make sure that you were consistent and mow over that or remove that once or twice a year for several years in a row.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I've been trying the approach of just taking out clippers and clipping them down so I don't disturb the other plants. So I was doing no mowing at all, but just trying to selectively cut out the blackberries and not having very good luck.
Mm.
I'm
They're like,
sorry
thanks
to
for
be
pruning
so
us.
tenacious.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks.
See.
So if there are any
I thought it
questions,
was
put them in the chat
interesting.
or mute. And then I think that I think we've answered all the ones that came in on the chat. There was a little back and forth about that tick solution being that Promethean being toxic to cats. So that could be a potential hazard for different homes. I had a quick question about ticks. I think, Liz, when you were talking, you mentioned a particular plant that they like. Are there any more tick encouraging or tick repellent plants that one might find in their yard and could either discourage or encourage as they're evaluating what's around?
Barberry has a really specific relationship with local deer populations and the spread of deer ticks. So that's kind of an unusual circumstance where it's really a compound issue that's created. Not a lot of research has had a chance to be done around this and preventative plants that I've been able to find. But hopefully as the ticks get worse, we can do more research and figure out how to really control that. Oh, I'm seeing a question about knotweed as well.
Mhm.
That's no one has found the perfect solution to that yet. It's the worst of the worst. If you can't remove a ton of soil from your property and really dig out the roots, it's repeated mowing, or in some extreme cases, it might even take introducing some kind of chemical for a little while and then stopping that once you've really nipped it in the bud. I hope it's small enough where it's manageable from the get-go.
This isn't scientifically proven, but I have had some luck, and Liz, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, with knotweed in like a small area, just covering, flipping it down, covering it with cardboard, covering the cardboard with new wood chips or soil. And that has worked for me, but I know that, you might not want a soil patch in your yard. It might not work for everyone, but for a small little area, it has worked for me.
I hear that's hit and miss. So some people it really does work with, and for others, maybe they got too strong too quickly and they're just over that hurdle. But it's worth a shot because it doesn't require those inputs or as much labor. I've heard that called the lasagna method also. And I
Nice.
love that name. or
See that.
landscape designers.
I didn't see that. I missed it.
It's from
Oh, there we
Carol
go.
Libby.
Nice. Yeah, so we used at the center, we used Terra Firma, who is actually in town, and he was amazing, and definitely gets Annie is also really wise with what kind of habitats we have around here, because he's lived in and among York in this region for a couple decades, I think. So I really loved him.
If you're interested in something that's a little bit more constructed and feels a little bit more like a fancy garden area, I've heard really good things about Larkspur as well.
So one thing I'm curious about as like a librarian, fun fact is, if there's kind of like either of your organizations have or could point us to like sort of a quick and dirty fact sheet of like, these are the pictures of the things one might look out for as like invasives, or like these are like 5 of the top things you could add if you're trying to kind of add some like height or wind buffering or whatever to your yard. I'm sure, obviously you guys know this, I'm trying to remember all the pictures and that were in the slides. But if that's something that you have, I would love to be able to share that at the library. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who would value having that on hand.
Yeah, we
And
have.
one-
Oh, go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say we have, I think, like a few different documents that kind of cover the different, facets of this, but I love the idea of combining all of that into one cohesive one. So I'd be happy to work on that with Liz and Kristen too, if you want to kind of go
Yeah.
in.
Sure, I would love that.
You read my mind. I also would like to advocate for people wanting to jump right away to some of those resources for invasive species. The Maine Natural Area Programs website is incredible for outlining techniques for removal and providing identification resources that are really relevant to your area. And the Wild Seed Project has some really great just Excel sheets full of stuff that's appropriate for planting at different times or in different locations, and also has resources to get you started growing your own from seed.
Thanks, this has been really great. I want to make sure that we don't skip anybody's questions if they have them. So please feel free to unmute or put it in the chat if you want to get a last question in. But we are also a little bit past 8 right now, so I want to make sure that we're respecting everybody's time. So this is your last call for questions before we say goodbye. To give everybody a last second to think, I'll do one more plug for our final, the library's final program for this series this year. On May 24th, which is 2 Wednesdays from now, we'll be having our sustainability and sort of food system celebration, which is going to sort of wrap up all the programs that we've been doing, and hopefully, we'll bring in a bunch of the presenters that we've had over the course of the program to, connect. But there will also be food and snacks and a chance to socialize. So 5:30 to 7 on May 24th. We did get one last question about the nutweed. Did someone say something about chemical treatment? And if so, what was suggested?
I did mention chemical treatment, and that's something that would be a last resort after trying a lot of different things, hopefully. I wouldn't be qualified to provide a specific recommendation on anything like that, but if nothing was working and you really needed to get rid of it, I would recommend maybe starting a conversation with a Maine master applicator to see if there's a safe option for your area that treats the water features in your area and your soil responsibly. And again, it is something to be avoided if you can, but it's also a last minute option or last resort option that can really help turn the tide on your treatment of your property.
And I know this is Mary Sue, you already have it, which is awful. It stinks. But the fill, I think a lot of times it really is moved with fill, and also look around your town too. I haven't driven all, York is obviously very large, but the town should be aware if there is knotweed on roadsides, because when they do the kind of brush clearing and the clearing the roads, they can end up inadvertently spreading it. So if you do notice knotweed in whatever town you're tuning in from, I would definitely call your municipal offices and make sure the road agents and everybody is aware of that, because through fill and then kind of that brush maintenance is how it can be spread into your backyard.
Well, without any other questions, I just want to say thank you to Kristen and Liz and Laura for being here tonight to talk to us about this important topic. I've been recording the program, so it will be available on the library's website in the next couple of days, as well as all of our other programs from this year and last. And any resources, I'll try to, add them up and put them together in the library somewhere. So if anyone's looking for more, we'll have it. So thank you all so much for your time this evening, and have a really good night.
Thank you, Sophie. Thanks for hosting and co-hosting.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much, Sophie.
Thank you,
Thank
Sophie.
you.
Bye.
Good night.